Hello and good evening. Welcome to Dallas Roundup with Mujeeb Kazi. I am thrilled to have a very special guest with us today, who is a seasoned politician who have ran a very strong and a positive campaign in the election 2020. She was a nominee from the Democratic Party for District 3 of Texas, representing North Texas for us at the national level. Without any further ado, please help me welcome Lulu Seikaly. Welcome on the show.
Hi, Mujeeb. It's good to see you. Unfortunately, not in person, but it's good to see you. I'm so happy to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much for giving us the time. I know you have had a pretty tough campaign. Started off in the month of January all the way through month of November, and it's been a long stretch. So can you go ahead and give us, for the consumption of our audience, a little bit of your background and see how the campaign went?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always start my story with this because my story starts even before I was born. My parents are immigrants from Lebanon. They immigrated to the U.S. In 1984 to achieve their American dream, and they did. My dad is a physician here in Dallas. My mom is a retired registered nurse. We've been in North Texas since 1987, so I was just a little toddler when we came to North Texas, barely 2 years old. And we've lived here ever since. I went to school here, actually went to SMU down the street for college on scholarship, worked on campaigns a little bit before I ended up going to law school down in Houston. So before I was a candidate for Congress, I was a labor and employment attorney representing small businesses, representing cities. And then I decided to jump into this race. Actually, we entered the race, when was it? October 2019 is when I officially entered the race. So it's been well over a year since we had been campaigning. And, I really felt like there weren't enough women in office. There definitely weren't enough first generations in office, and there sure weren't a lot of people that looked like me in office. And, this district, the two big cities here are Plano, Frisco, I guess 3, and McKinney. It's so ever changing. And I felt like, you know what, we need somebody who's going to be able to represent those interests and really have a voice. So we had been going full speed for 13 months. And November didn't have the result that we wanted, but that's okay because we made a lot of noise. We got people scared. We got people starting to pay attention. And that was really, obviously the intent was winning. But the thing about it is, if I could have inspired at least one person to get up and vote or walk for their favorite candidate or decide to run for office, it was well worth it.
I think it is a great deal. You need a great deal of encouragement and support from the family in order for a woman to run for the office. We understand that, our country, US, being very open and welcoming to have the representation in the office from the women's side. But I was just doing my research. And, in the Congress, we have like 535 voting members in our Congress. And out of that, 435 are the representative and 100 senators. Believe me or not, I was shocked to see that 101 US those members who are, female are the women who make up this in the Congress are like 23%, and our population is like 51% of that. And obviously, we are slowly, gradually getting there, but we are not quite there yet. So we need to have more women coming out and participating in our national elections and local elections and state elections. And we are very grateful that you had the courage to take that step and step up to the plate and presented yourselves, because being in the public arena and especially running from Texas is a milestone in itself. So what do you think where we stand today in terms of our women representation in state level and the federal level, to that matter?
We've made amazing strides forward. I don't want to discount what we've done in the past, but we still, like you said, barely 25% of our representation in Washington are female. And I think that says a lot about our society and how difficult it is, not only for women to step up, but for anybody to step up to run for office. And I think that we need to make it much more accessible. We need to make it easier on families. We need to make it easier at home to make sure that, candidates can still pay their bills and, do things like that. But in Texas, we had such an excitement around our entire state because, although 23% are members of women, 23% of Congress are women, we only had under 30% of women actually step up to run for congressional seats nationwide. But in Texas, we had so many women on the congressional ticket that it didn't feel like we were still that far behind. I mean, we had women running in Houston and Austin and in the Dallas, Fort Worth area and in East Texas. I mean, we had women all over the state, which is encouraging, but we can't get discouraged, right? I know that there were a lot of municipal elections on this November ballot. I know there's municipal elections coming up in May. So, I know a lot of us are tired and exhausted because this presidential campaign has taken a lot out of us, but we can't forget those very important elections. I mean, I heard a candidate so eloquently say that the lower down the ballot you are, the more that person really affects your life. So, if you're a young woman and you're thinking about stepping into the arena, but you may be a little scared, run for school board, run for city council, run for, board of supervisors, whatever your arena is, and start getting involved because, like Kamala Harris said, if we're not invited to the table, we're bringing our folding chairs to there and we're going to take a seat regardless. I think that we definitely need those women to step up, especially young women.
I was at one of your kickoff meeting at the Texas King when we met your dad, and he sounds like a very sportive gentleman that he wanted you to represent the community, North Texas at the national level. How the sport has been from the family since you've been up for the public office?
It's, my parents, they're both very professionally driven. So for them, and I think a lot of immigrant families are like that, they're very professionally driven. I was going to go to college. I was going to go to law school. I was going to get married and have kids and start a family. And, we were almost there, right? And so when I told them this crazy idea that I wanted to leave my law firm job where I was on partner track at my law firm, it was going to be a very comfortable life and do this crazy thing. My dad said, where are my grandkids? Like, hello, where are my, my husband and I had been married for a couple of years. Where are my grandkids? And so I think at the beginning they were incredibly hesitant. And I think more so they were hesitant in the sense of they didn't want to see their child being thrown into the arena, getting, a lot of bad slurs thrown at her. They were being parents, right? They wanted to just be able to, although I'm 34, they wanted to protect their child as much as they can, even as an adult. But secretly, I know my parents are just beyond proud. And I think he even said at that same meeting, Mujeeb, my dad said, only in America could you ever dream that your child, as a child of immigrants, could step up to do something like this. Because regardless of the results, I was still able to become the Democratic nominee for United States Congress in my home in North Texas. And that's something that a lot of immigrant families can't even, I could definitely not do this in Lebanon where my parents came from. But I think that's where the pride comes from, is that my parents look at it and they say, we came to this country for a better life. Look what our daughter did. This is the better life that we dreamed of.
Absolutely. And so rightly, your dad said that can only happen in the USA. Unfortunately, what we see today, it was not expected of it. I was earlier watching the news. Actually, I was watching a tweet from somebody that there's a protest going on in Washington today. I have not seen it in USA. Once you take part in election, whatever the outcome of the election is, we as a gracious nation as we are, we accept the result and move on. But that is very unprecedented that is happening today. What do you have to say about that?
I'm very disappointed, to be quite honest. And I agree with you. This is something that we would see in third world countries where we don't have, where those people don't really expect the results to be truthful and honest. And we are the leading democracy in the entire world. And we are an example for other countries that want to become developed as a first world nation. And the fact that we still have a good portion of the country still trying to cause chaos after, I think I saw on Twitter yesterday, somebody said Joe Biden has won this election 56 times because that's how many lawsuits Trump has lost, trying to overturn the election results in key swing states that he needed to win. And I think it's sad, but, I think this is what Trump wanted. He wanted the chaos. And that was a term I think as Democrats, we should have used more in our campaign strategies. We should have used more that if you vote for Trump, if you vote for people who support him, who are not holding him accountable, you are voting for continuous chaos. And we're seeing it. It's proof. The fact of the matter is Joe Biden is getting sworn as the next president of the United States in a little over a month. And, Trump is still trying to cause this chaos because he doesn't want to leave office. I think it's sad, but that just goes to show that we need people who are going to step up to run for office, because the way our system was built, it was built on a system of checks and balances. And we need representatives, whether it's on, in United States Congress or United States Senate, to be able to check the president when he does stuff like this, not just Trump, but God forbid any future president down the line. So I think that just goes to show that if you're thinking about running for office and you want to make a change, don't sit back any longer, do it.
Well, you're by profession, you are an attorney, and we are, United States is a constitutional democracy, and that set the stone for many other countries to follow, and you have just rightly said so. My question is that what would be the outcome of this? Are these protests or these demonstrations are going to bring any positive for the US, except that there would be a chaos? Legally, I'm talking about legally. What other options does he have for the consumption of our audience? But there's a conspiracy going on. People are saying that, there is a chance that he, obviously Supreme Court had already turned down the request to overturn the election. But what other option that he has? I'm just trying to understand how do we go about from here onwards,
I think that we have to, it's I babysat a lot as a teenager. And I think that we have to kind of go back to basic principles of not showing him attention. Right. And, just moving forward. And I think Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have done an impeccable job of that. They're not taking the bait. They're not paying attention to what he's doing. They're working on their transition. They're appointing people who are going to be sworn in January 21st of 2021. They're not taking the bait because at the end of the day, this is a distraction. This is chaos. This is a distraction. If he were a smart, I will use it. I don't like the term politician very often. I think it has negative connotations, but I'll use it with him. If he were a smart politician, he should be focusing on the fact that Pfizer approved a vaccine today. That's what he should be focusing on, is that this chaos that he's created because of his negligence, because of him refusing to listen to the experts on his team, that we could have prevented this pandemic from, we can at least reduce how severe the pandemic has been. He should be focusing on the fact that Pfizer has approved a vaccine. We're going to start going back on the up and up, and we're going to get our country back on track. And he should go out with grace and say, look, I'm handing the reins to Joe Biden. We are going to get back on track. Joe, good luck. I'm looking forward to supporting you as much as I can. That's what a gracious person should do at this end of the day. But because we know, I don't even know how to say this, but because we know that he's a creator of chaos and he thrives on chaos, we know that's not going to happen. So I think at the end of the day, I think Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have done exactly what they need to do. Ignore him, focus on the future, focus on how we're going to get this country back on track once they're both sworn in a month and a couple days. So,
I'm pretty sure that you're going to run for the office once again. We do need the representation from the women's side to represent us at the national level. But my question is this. I personally I would like to see for all congressmen and women and the senators to serve based on terms. They have now, they can run for unlimited amount of time, and they don't have to retire until the last breath, I would say. Would you like to see our Congress moving towards putting a term on the representatives as well as the senators? So making sure that the new blood, the new generation should come and bring the new blood, the new ideas to the nation rather than just circling around in the same arena.
Yeah, it's definitely something I've been thinking about more and more, especially on the campaign trail. This was something I never really thought about. Actually, I did think about it when Pete Sessions finally gave up, finally lost his seat in the 32nd district because he had been there for forever. And luckily we have an amazing Representative Allred in that seat now. But to open the door for younger people to step up, I think that that's something that we should start looking at. We should also start looking at modernizing, although we are, the leader of the free world, we're a constitutional democracy. We should start modernizing how we run our elections, how we run the offices. So, doing things like getting rid of the Electoral College. I'm 100% in favor of getting rid of the Electoral College because we know, I think it was George H. Bush, so George W.'s father, was the last Republican to win the popular vote, I believe. I have to triple check on that. But that just goes to show that majority of our country vote Democratic. I mean, and if that's the situation, then having Trump, having all these other Republican presidents, I think that getting rid of the Electoral College and moving towards a popular vote is much more effective. With that being said, I think term limits are something we should look at. I don't think that they should be short. I think as a member of Congress, my team and I were talking about this, like as November was moving forward, was, if I win, I have to start raising money again for my next election because it's 2 years, right? It's a 2-year term, but really by this summer, you're going to have people declaring who's going to run again for the seat. So, I mean, it's very quick. It doesn't give you a lot of time to really do anything. I've been kind of thinking in the back of my head, do members of Congress's terms need to be longer than 2 years? Because it's hard to do something in 2 years because you're just immediately campaigning again. So it's definitely, I think that we do need to modernize kind of the way our system is being handled.
So I'm going to take the, big use of the opportunity that I have talking to you. Ever since the women started taking part in the politics since 1917, we have seen that over 222 women were elected at the Congress from a Democratic side and 103 from the Republican side. And that's a heck of a difference. Why do you think it is?
Someone asked me that question not too long ago, and I think my answer was it was based on pure speculation. I think the Democratic Party is the party of inclusiveness, that they want as many diverse ideas and thinkers as possible, because they know that the only way that we change is if we bring all the diversification of ideas to the table. But where does diversification of ideas come from? It comes with different ages, different genders, different backgrounds, different religions, different languages, etc. The Republican Party to me is a little bit more like it's much more monochromatic, I guess. It's not really, I don't see it as the party of diversity. I would never, if anybody asked me which is the party of diversity in the United States, it's easy, Democrats, like not even a blink of an eye. But I think that the Democrats also do a lot to encourage women to step up to run, because they know that in order to move this country forward, to get new ideas to the table, to actually make effective change, we need people from different backgrounds. I mean, I'll give you this perfect example. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, who was a supporter of mine, she's senator out of New York. She was a presidential candidate for a little bit, before Joe Biden got the nomination. And she's brought to the table a bill for free child health care, for free child care. And now, I don't want to assume anything, but I would imagine that I don't think a man would ever think about that free childcare would be something that they need to put on the table. But because she's a mom, and because she knows like how working moms struggle, that's something that she brought to the table from her background, her experiences from being a woman or from being a working mother. So I think that in order to make sure that we get those diversification of ideas. We definitely need more women. I think the Democrats are the ones that are really pushing for that. And I'm grateful to be part of such an inclusive party.
This week, I'm going to digress a little bit from the subject, but I just cannot let the show go away without having to talk about this. This week, yesterday was the International Day of Human Rights celebrated by the UN. And you and I talked about it when we were at the kickoff meeting. And I'm from Kashmir, and it's a grave concern for us as an expat from the Kashmir that human rights violations are to the point that, even the Amnesty International is banned to report anything that is happening on ground. The media is still banned. The free flow of information is absolutely not accessible. All those information that we are getting are third-party informations, but there are thousands of people, either they have gone missing, thousands of young kids have been either blinded by the pellet guns, or they have been picked up and been put in the incarceration camps outside of Kashmir. Their parents today do not know where their whereabouts are. Over 1 million boots on the ground, caging about 8 million people. And still, I don't see the outcry and the noise that should have been made by the world outside of the region, and without having to realize the fact that India, Pakistan, and China being the nuclear power, that has become a flashpoint. And God forbid if the war ever breaks out in the region, that can engulf the entire, not only the region, but the world. Do you have to say anything about that? And how do we go about on this a grave concern that I think has been put behind the burner?
I think there are a lot, and unfortunately, there are so many countries violating human rights laws as we speak. I mean, we look at the Uyghurs in China, we look at, Israel and Palestine, closer to where my family is. And I think that the United States does have an obligation to be kind of that voice to magnify those violations of human rights, and making sure that these countries, these governments are being held accountable for any sort of violation of those rights. With the Trump administration, we've moved, I can't even tell you, 1 million steps backwards in 4 years when it comes to international diplomacy. And that was something, that I dreamed about doing. Was, if elected, I would have loved to serve on the House Committee on Foreign Affairs to be able to bring light to some of these human rights violations issues. That was my specialty in college, was international politics and human rights and things like that. So that would have been something I would have loved to shed a light on, to make sure that we can hold these countries accountable, that as a leader of the free world, we're not letting them get away with what they're doing. And we have to make sure that we set an example. And unfortunately, in the past 4 years, we've done nothing but set bad examples. So I'm very confident with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Tony Blinken, who was named Secretary of State. I had the opportunity to speak with him after the awful Beirut blast earlier this summer. I'm confident that we're in good hands to rebuild some of these relationships and making sure that we're holding these countries accountable for any violation of human rights that is being happening.
Do you have any advice for the future women running for the office? Do's and don'ts?
Do's, I would say, make sure you get a strong team around you. I was very fortunate to have women mentors who surrounded me to make sure that I was in good hands. Running for office is not hard, or is hard. Excuse me. Running for office is very hard. Running as a young woman minority, 5 times harder. The expectations set upon you are that much harder. I would have been the youngest member of the Texas delegation. So I think that as a young woman, there are expectations that people look to me for. Do they see a childish nature in me, or do they see someone more mature? Do they, as a woman, how is she wearing her hair? How is she dressing? The biggest piece of advice I would give is making sure you don't lose yourself. And I think that was something that I think I did a really good job of making sure that I didn't lose myself in this process. And I think that made me more comfortable in the results that I got on November, because I can't look back and say, oh no, because, so-and-so told me to do X, Y, and Z, I lost, and I didn't lose as myself. So, making sure you keep yourself, and listen to your team around you. They know better, but at the end of the day, use your gut. And I think that I learned to listen to my gut a lot more, something I didn't really trust in the past. But I think that in the last 13 months, that was something that kind of raised to me. But just don't lose yourself.
Great, because I don't know if you know it or not, but I was running for the city council as well in this election, and I had to face some of the prejudice that I was not expecting. But those were very handful of people that were passing some racial slurs and whatnot. But I overlooked them. I didn't pay attention because 98, 99% of the people were very receptive, very accommodating, and very respectful. Did you have to face any of those things in your campaign?
Not, and I was fortunate in that aspect. I didn't face any racial slurs or attacks. I know that there were some municipal candidates in my area that did, and so which was very unfortunate. The biggest attack I faced was that I moved away to Northern California for a couple of years and came back to Texas. That was I don't know if you call that a racial slur, but that was kind of the people, my opponent trying to paint me as an outsider who's bringing liberal California values when he failed to recognize that I grew up here. I left for a couple of years and came back. I mean, that's not, young people do that all the time. So, but we did receive hate mail, from people saying, go back to your home, go back to your country, go back to where you came from, similar to Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib that they get. But nothing from my opponent. My opponent, while I don't believe he is a good representative for our community, I was very gracious that he didn't stoop that low. I know a lot of other candidates who come from different backgrounds were subject to racial attacks and things like that.
Well, I must say that it was an absolute pleasure having you on our show. That brings us to the end of our time. And I really am grateful and thank you so very much for giving us the time, and look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks, Mujeeb, for reaching out. So good to see you.
Likewise. Thank you. That's it for today, guys. Until next time, take care of yourself.